Hi, thanks everyone for coming along this afternoon. My name's Dan Kidby. I'm a co-founder of Animal Rebellion, and I'm really excited and honoured to be talking to you today about a new campaign where we are going to be mobilising 500 people to shut down the supply of the dairy industry to the UK. So what this will mean in practice is that for a 1 to 2 week period, there will be no milk on the supermarket shelves. This has never been done before in the UK or around the world that we know of. And if we accomplish it, it will be front page news every single day, we believe, and it will be on primetime news at 6 p.m. every night. And we believe it will create a global conversation, challenging the animal farming industry and animal fishing industry, and calling for the transition to a plant-based food system and to rewild land, drawing down carbon dioxide and restoring nature as a solution to the climate crisis, as the key solution to the climate crisis. So I want to start off with a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. And it reads, "Non-violent direct action seeks to create such a crisis and foster such a tension that a community which has constantly refused to negotiate is forced to confront the issue. It seeks to dramatize the issue that it can no longer be ignored." Martin Luther King wrote this from a jail in Birmingham City in 1963. He wrote it from a jail cell, where he had been with thousands of other people, taking the kinds of action which we take in Animal Rebellion. And he did this because he recognized that non-violent direct action, from that real principled place, from that loving place of recognizing that an injustice is taking place. And we as people will not tolerate it anymore. We won't tolerate the destruction of our planet. We won't tolerate the mass extinction of billions of animals. And we won't tolerate the trillions of animals who are suffering in the farming and fishing industries. What happened in the civil rights movement was that a group of people, it began as a small group, but then erupted into a powerful movement of hundreds of thousands of people, was that they said that enough is enough and they're not going to tolerate it anymore. But crucially, they did it with a vision for the future, a vision which was compelling, a vision which was powerful, that could inspire people and that could excite people. Not from a place of anger and not from a place of hatred, but from a place of deep belief in that vision and deep love for all life. And we're very much in the tradition that goes from Gandhi to King to the modern day. So my name is Dan Kidby. I'm a co-founder of Animal Rebellion, and I became dedicated to this movement. I've been involved in the animal rights and environmental movement for about the last decade or so. Almost a decade, rather. I shouldn't exaggerate, tell the truth, it's very important. Almost a decade I've been involved in this movement. And my commitment really got secured when in 2016 I went to a chicken farm. And this was a so-called free-range, organic, RSPCA-assured chicken farm. And what I found, still haunts me to this very day and still makes me cry to this very day. It was going into a shed where when I opened the doors, my eyes began to burn from ammonia in the air that was coming from all of the feces and all of the urine and all of the rotting corpses on the ground. And I saw that with my own eyes, just the absolute cruelty and depravity and brutality of this place. And when I went through this chicken farm, I came across a small chicken who couldn't move because they couldn't reach the food and they were starving to death. And they looked so vulnerable and so frail, and it broke my heart to see them sitting there in this state. And anyone who goes and does chicken rescue knows that those animals, you're meant to leave those animals behind because there's not a chance for them to survive, and you need to focus on rescuing the ones that actually have a chance. But I just felt this absolute connection to this animal, who I later called Tiny, and said to myself, no, I'm going to take this one out. And I did, and I carried her out of the farm and to a sanctuary, and I held her in my hands, this tiny little chicken like this big, and held her in my hands by my heart to keep her warm. And fortunately, she survived and was able to live a life in sanctuary. But so many animals don't get that opportunity. So from that day, I committed myself that I would do whatever is non-violently necessary to transform these systems and bring about a better world for these animals. And that's what Animal Rebellion is based on. It's doing whatever is necessary. It's taking action, even if it means that action comes at personal cost, even if it means we may get arrested, even if it means we may get imprisoned, even if it means we may get hurt or even killed. We will do what is required in order to bring about change. So just a bit about the broader situation of where we find ourselves in society. So we're currently in the 6th mass extinction event in the Earth's history. Over 1 million species are currently threatened with extinction. We're in an insect apocalypse where 75% of insect life is currently being wiped out and is on the verge of extinction. What this will bring about is, if this is allowed to continue, will be a mass ecosystem collapse and die-off of species, which will inhibit not only our animal cousins, but also our own ability to have food and to live and to thrive on this planet. We're also in a climate emergency. Carbon emissions, despite having international conferences since 1992 on the year that I was born, emissions have continued to rise year on year on year on year on year. What this will mean in practice, what we are actually already seeing in practice, is wildfires. This is in Greece. Droughts. This is in Turkey. Floods in India. Wildfires in Canada. This town burned to the ground, just caught fire because it was 49 degrees. Floods in Germany and Belgium. Typhoons in Philippines. Droughts in Kenya. So this is all happening today. Tens of millions of people are already dying today as a result of the climate emergency. And what is predicted to be happening in the future is between 1 and 3 billion refugees, because there's going to be the Middle East and Africa and other parts of the world are going to become uninhabitable due to increasing temperatures, such that people would suffer heat stress if they were to go outside and try to work. It's going to be a massive movement of people. We're going to see the global supply chains collapse as we are no longer able to produce food. It's estimated that there's going to be a 50% chance of global crop failure by 2040, I think. 2030, 2040, a 50% chance of crop failure. We're already seeing the impacts of food systems collapsing with, for instance, just from the Ukraine war and how fragile the system is once food can no longer be produced and distributed around the world, the devastation and the starvation that that's causing around the world in places like Madagascar currently. But don't take my word for it. This is the words of Boris Johnson, our Prime Minister, on the run-up to COP26. We will see desertification, drought, crop failure, and mass movements of humanity on a scale not seen before, not because of some unforeseen natural event or disaster, but because of us, because of what we are doing now. And our grandchildren will know that we are the culprits, and that we were warned, and they will know that it was this generation that came centre stage to speak and act on behalf of posterity, and that we missed our cue. And they will ask themselves, what kind of people we were to be so selfish and so short-sighted. It's time for humanity to grow up. So this is the words of Boris Johnson, who is doing, I think it's safe to say, absolutely fucking nothing to deal with this situation. Only the other day I was reading about the National Food Strategy, which was absolute crap in the first place in terms of ensuring food security and reducing emissions and reducing impact on nature, is now being watered down, that any of the good stuff they are putting into it is being taken away. They just aren't taking this situation seriously, and they know what is coming. In the words of the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, he speaks on the publication of the latest IPCC report, which is the annual report detailing how the climate crisis is progressing and what's to come. He said on that publication, the jury has reached a verdict and it is damning. This report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is a litany of broken climate promises. It is a file of shame, cataloguing the empty pledges that puts us firmly on track towards an unlivable world. He says we are on a pathway to global warming of more than double the 1.5 degree legally agreed limit in Paris. Some governments and business leaders, like Boris Johnson, are saying one thing but doing another. Simply put, they are lying, and the results will be catastrophic. This is a climate emergency. Later on in that speech, he said that the truly dangerous radicals are not the climate activists, but it is the governments and business leaders who continue putting us on this pathway to suicide and genocide. But I'm not saying all of this to upset you or to depress you. I don't want you to go home feeling sad or scared. I'm saying this because people are beginning and have been beginning for a long time to rise up against this. This began with Extinction Rebellion in 2019, who transformed the global conversation by taking mass civil disobedience, mass non-violent direct action, in the tradition of Gandhi, in the tradition of Martin Luther King. And they raised the alarm to the world when the politicians and the corporations and the liberal establishment of NGOs would not and were too scared to do so. This has evolved over time. Animal Rebellion came in, bringing in the urgent message that we need to transition to a plant-based food system. We've seen the growth of movements like Insulate Britain and Just Stop Oil, who have taken action day after day after day, desperately trying to achieve change. They've been willing to get arrested on multiple occasions, many of them who have been really dedicated to be doing this, going arrested 10 times, 15 times. Some people have found themselves in prison. And this number is only increasing. So Animal Rebellion exists as part of this broader ecosystem of thousands of people who are no longer willing to let this happen. So Animal Rebellion is a mass movement started in 2019 that uses non-violent direct action to bring about a transition to a plant-based food system. We do this to stop mass extinction, to alleviate the climate crisis, and for the billions and trillions of animals who suffer every day within these industries. What Animal Rebellion did when we first began was call for this plant-based food system. And at the time, nobody would talk about it. Nobody would address animal farming and fishing. And we forced that conversation in. And it's now becoming to be accepted. It's part of the mainstream environmental discourse. But it's not enough, because actually we haven't been telling the truth. That is that the dealing with animal farming and fishing, transitioning to a plant-based food system and rewilding the land that would be freed up when we reduce our farmland by 76% globally by making this transition, that land can be returned to nature. And when that land gets returned to nature, we can rebuild the ecosystems, we can rebuild the forests, we can restore the ocean ecosystems as well, and that can draw down carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, limiting the climate crisis. And it can bring back nature and end, just in a very short period of time, end the mass extinction crisis. So what we're saying in Animal Rebellion is not that this is an important part of the story of dealing with our environmental crisis, but it is the key solution. So that's what we're going to be bringing forward as part of this massive movement of people later on this September. So just to give you a sense of what I mean when I talk about rewilding, what we see, both of these places are Scotland. In the bottom right, you see sheep grazing land. So this is land where sheep are just going and, eating grass all the time, and it's barren. It looks like beautiful countryside, but in reality, there is no life there. I don't know if any of you have ever been to one of these places and stood there, but you don't even hear bird song. You don't see insects flying around. But we look at it and we've been trained to see it as nature, but it isn't. Because this was once land that had forests that hundreds of years ago was cut down. We did it in the UK to bring animal farming in, and then we exported that around the world. In the top left is what looks like when we take a piece of that land and rewild it. So that land in the bottom right can look like this beautiful forest in the top left. And this is really what we're fighting for. Like, it's all good to fight against something and trying to end something, but what we really believe in Animal Rebellion is having a real positive future, because then we can tap into that real deeper place, that hope, that faith, that love, that childish naivety to bring about a different world and a more just world. So just like a bit of science on this, I don't know, that graph kind of speaks for itself. This is the sequestration potential of if we were to be having these forests in place and drawing down carbon emissions. It's worth saying that Harvard University published a study in 2019, and in that study they said that the UK, if we were to implement a transition away from animal farming to a plant-based food system, we would be net negative in emissions. We wouldn't even need, well, we would still need to tackle the fossil fuel industry, but doing so would make us net negative. It's a tremendous change that we can make by implementing this solution. And it's the solution that when the UN brought together the IPCC, which are the top climate scientists in the world, and the IPBES, which are the top biodiversity scientists in the world, the suggestion that they came to was that we have to rewild the earth. That was their key solution. And they said in that report, in 2019, the first time these two groups have ever been brought together in history, they said that we can't do it because of animal farming and fishing. And that's why we're calling for this. And that's why we're willing to take such bold and drastic action to make it happen. So it's worth saying that since Animal Rebellion came into being, this transition has begun. It's very slowly happening, but we're starting to see the Netherlands moving towards cutting their animal farming numbers. We're looking to see Denmark investing in the plant-based food market, and we are looking at places like Berlin University transitioning their university catering towards plant-based catering. By the way, Animal Rebellion also has a university campaign to bring that around. the UK as well, in case you're a student and you want to do that too. So just a short note on why direct action, and particularly why it works. The reason why nonviolent action works is because, one, you disrupt. So like Martin Luther King says, you put the issue that nobody wants to discuss on the table. You make it such that it cannot be ignored. And we know one of the values of nonviolence is truth. We know that we are speaking the truth. So we know when we put this issue on the table, when this debate and this conversation is finally allowed to happen, then people will see, and we have faith that people will see that this change needs to happen. And also through that disruption, we pressure the power holders in order to do what is required. Sacrifice is a really core component. Taking the action, no matter the personal cost, people see that happening. And when they see that, they get inspired. They say, wow, people are actually willing to put their bodies on the line for this. And that evokes a sympathy and a solidarity that brings about the mass consciousness shift. We see this time and time again throughout history. Respect. We do not hate farmers. We do not hate politicians. What we do is we see them for who they are, which is human beings. Human beings who struggle, human beings who suffer themselves like us. We respect them and we show them kindness. Because what we want to build is a world that is kind. And we do that by being kind in our bodies and in our action and in our words and in our thoughts. So we enter into this space from a place of love, while still willing to go towards conflict. You can go towards conflict with love in your heart. It doesn't have to be with hate and anger. And the dilemma aspect is that we say to the government, we're going to do this action, and if you want to put us in, if you want to arrest us and you want to put us in prison, then that's a dilemma. The government actually do not want to be imprisoning people because it looks bad. It looks bad. So we put them in a dilemma. We walk towards that and say, are you really going to do it? Whilst also Just Stop Oil are sending thousands of people to go and disrupt the oil fields. Are you really going to imprison all of these young people, all of these older people, all of these teachers, all of these doctors, all of these vicars? You're going to really send them to jail for standing up for their futures? Are you going to do that? Like, that's what we're doing in this movement. Putting them in a position where it's better for them to act than to repress us. So just a short note, I wonder how I'm doing for time. Oh, that's good. So just a short note, we know at Animal Rebellion that we can change the world because we've already done so before. So in 2019, when Animal Rebellion came into being, we organized a rebellion alongside Extinction Rebellion. And our main pioneering action was to go and disrupt and occupy the Smithfield meat market in London. And we also followed up by going and shutting down the Billingsgate fish market. In both instances, whilst also dialoguing with the butchers and the fishermen and the fishing sales people, what do you call them? And building relationships and making friends whilst also disrupting them. And through this process, through taking this action with thousands of people, well, what we see going into the Google Trends results at that time is so behind me on this graph, we see the amount of times people Google the words plant-based. And what we see during the October Rebellion is a spike so dramatic, which was a direct result of our actions. And what we also see is a following spike. You can see that, right? I'm not standing in the way. I see people doing this. So in the October Rebellion, we see that first spike. And then following up, we see the massive spike again, which is the Veganuary of the following year. So what we see is the social movement activity also translates into personal transformation. So during the October Rebellion, we gripped the nation around animal farming and fishing, and then that led directly to people doing personal transformation. So the following years of Veganuary were not as impactful in terms of people actively going and thinking to themselves, what is this thing? I'm going to go and Google this thing. It's worth bearing in mind that our message had those words plant-based in it. So they were seeing what we were doing and they were going and Googling. So that shows that people were actually emotionally moved by what we were doing. And what we also see is after the October Rebellion is that it stays higher than it was before, which means that you see an actual seismic shift in those few months, where there's just a longer term interest. So that's like it stays higher. So we also know that we are changing the world because our opponents think that we're changing the world. So this book was published very recently, The Great Plant-Based Con. It's a very well-researched book because they knew who occupied Smithfield Meat Market. You see very clearly it was XR who did it. No, it wasn't XR, it was Animal Rebellion. Kind of shows the rest of the research in the book in how they were kind of taking down the plant-based. It's just, anyway, getting distracted. So what they say in this book, I'm going to try to tilt this up again. So they said that a key aspect of both Greta Thunberg and Extinction Rebellion's message was and continues to be the demonization of meat and dairy. It's worth bearing in mind that it was not a key aspect of Extinction Rebellion's message. The only people putting forth that message was Animal Rebellion. And that's why we came into being, because Extinction Rebellion was not saying it. But it was perceived, because of the intensity and drama of our actions, it was perceived as coming from Extinction Rebellion as a central message. She then went on to say that Greta Thunberg and Extinction Rebellion have established a hold over the imaginations of the young, and their message that avoiding meat and dairy as a way to avert climate catastrophe is, what does it say? Hitting home. Sorry, it's really small on my screen, and if I turn, you can't hear me. So, all right, so what's the plan? So the plan is to disrupt the supply of the milk to the UK supermarkets. So this is the biggest thing that Animal Rebellion has ever done. What we're going to do is we're going to go to the supply and we're going to block it day after day after day after day. And we're going to do this with 500 people. We only need 500 people to do this because what we do is we break people up into teams of 15 people. Those teams are led by someone more experienced in taking action, who is able to hold that loving space, who's able to provide support to people in their first time of taking action and so on. And they will go to the various different places, which at this moment I will leave undisclosed, to stop trucks leaving. We will be mass trespassing onto dairy places, I think, dairy supply places, and we will be shutting them down. We know that this is possible, again, because we've done this before. So our team who's organising and designing the actions for this were the team who delivered Just Stop Oil, were involved in delivering Just Stop Oil. So Just Stop Oil earlier on this year went and shut down petrol supplies in the UK day after day after day. If you drive and you live in the southeast, maybe you couldn't get petrol, and you may remember that time. They did that when there was a national police response, because of course petrol is, the whole country runs on petrol, and they had helicopters and they had police officers all over the country trying to stop them, but they still were able to do it. That was a stronger police response than we predict we're going to be getting, particularly because we're going to be doing this after Just Stop Oil have just done it again, and before a rebellion from Extinction Rebellion is going to be happening. So we're going to be sandwiching our actions in between this massive eruption of disruptive protest in the UK. So we believe basically we can run rings around the police and still pull off our actions quite successfully. And so what the actions look like is that they will look like sitting in front of trucks, climbing on top of tankers, climbing over fences, and occupying distribution sites, and other places, and also going into supermarkets as well. And so in order to bring some public drama, so we'll have some people going and blocking supermarket aisles just to give that bit of extra juice for the media, so there's some kind of closer to home type stuff too. So the demands we're going to be putting forward in this campaign are for the government to support farmers and fishing communities. That's very crucial, supporting farmers and fishing communities to move away from animal farming and fishing as part of an urgent and immediate transition to a plant-based food system, and that the government commits to rewild the freed up land and ocean as part of a broader program of wildlife restoration and carbon drawdown. And so, like I said, we'll be saying that this is the key solution to the climate crisis that needs to be implemented. We'll be saying that this is the only thing that can secure us to have a livable future. And we'll be saying that if we do this transition, it's going to be better for everyone. We will all benefit. All of humanity will benefit who won't be going into absolute civilizational collapse. The animals will benefit because their ecosystems will be restored and their habitats will be restored. And animals on farms will benefit because they will no longer be exploited in terrible suffering conditions. We will also be going into dialogue with the farming communities as well. So during these actions, we'll be going and talking to farmers and saying, we're not against you, we just want a future. We want to support you to be able to continue living your rural lifestyle without harming animals. We're also building connections across the social movement space with different organizations and saying to them, we're going to be doing this in September, make sure you're ready to take advantage of this massive media spectacle. So hopefully all of these other organizations will be ready to mobilize all of their public communications and so on to make the most of this dramatic event that we are going to create. So this is the moment where I say, in order to do this, we need 500 people. And I'd like you to be one of them, and probably get some friends too, if that's possible. If you have any friends who's up for this. So what it means when I ask you to participate, it means taking action. It means taking action and willing to suffer the consequences of getting arrested, and doing that on multiple occasions. So asking for people to commit to arrest on at least 2 occasions. We will support you through this. We'll be offering non-violence direct action training, which will prepare you to stay calm and peaceful and understand all of what might be happening during these actions. And we will put you into teams and into communities in order to build this strong community of civil resistance in defense of all life on Earth. We're also looking for people who have been especially moved by what I'm saying today to come on and help us build this campaign. We can have full-time roles, part-time roles, really giving yourself to this movement in order to build this massive resistance and go out and change the world. So I just want to say a little bit about risk and what does it mean to get arrested, right? So mostly for first-time offenders, what we've seen in this movement is, I've been arrested 5 times in this movement, and I have never once been called to court, I've never once been fined, I've never once been convicted. Every time I've been arrested, they've just kind of let me off. That doesn't happen for everyone. Some people go through the court system, and for first-time offenders, they tend to get a £100 to £200 fine. Some people who tends to be people who take action again and again and again, or take very, very high-risk action, have been to prison as part of this movement. So there's, I'm going to say, close to 20 people, maybe, have been in prison for about a 3 to 6 month period. But we believe that just going and getting arrested a couple of times will not put you in prison. We believe it will just give you a bit of a slap on the wrists. There has been a lot of hoo-ha lately in the media about the government introducing new policing bills to put higher risks and threats in terms of taking this kind of action. And they've made it such that just going and doing this kind of action could lead to a prison sentence. What we believe is that by doing this with hundreds and doing this with thousands of people, they do not want to put us in prison. We believe this is a move on the chessboard that they're trying to do to scare people off. The thing which is really, really worth bearing in mind is that they have always had the laws and legislation to put people in prison. Like, they've never rounded up organisers, and they've never put them on trial for that, and they've never imprisoned them. Instead, they're trying to deter people by putting the threat to the people taking the action, which I don't believe they're going to follow through on. But if they were willing to follow through on it, I'd already be in prison right now. So the thing about civil resistance, the spirit which fueled the civil rights movement, that fueled the movement that Martin Luther King led, was captured by the words of Diane Nash, who was a phenomenal organizer and still continues to be a very wise, loving soul. Said, "We changed ourselves." I'll go back a bit. "The only person you can change is yourself. When you change yourself, the world has to fit up against the new you. We changed ourselves into people who could not be segregated, and that presented a new set of options to Southern white racists. They had to either shoot us or desegregate, because they could no longer segregate us. And when the oppressed withdrew their participation from the oppressive system, the system fell." So we believe that if we ourselves can change ourselves into the type of people who will not accept climate catastrophe, will not accept animal exploitation, we believe we can bring about the change we wish to see. Like, they can either arrest us, they can imprison us, they can kill us, but we will not stop until we bring about change. And to finish off, I want to tell a very short story, but a very sad story, about what it means for the animals who themselves are resisting their oppression every single day. So this is a cow named Bessie, who escaped from a farm a few years ago. She ran over the fence, she made her way into the local town, and she was just great. She was visibly very distressed, according to the accounts of people who lived in that area. But she was just standing on the grass eating for a brief moment of freedom. And in response, the police mobilized dozens of officers, a helicopter, 20 squad vehicles, and 6 sniper rifles. And they surrounded her, and they shot her dead. I believe that any sacrifice that I can make in this movement is nothing compared to the sacrifices made by so many animals every single day. So we're going to, if you're feeling inspired or willing or intrigued enough to learn more about this campaign, we've got some other people here from Animal Rebellion. Maybe if you want to put your hands up. So we've got Ben, Dora, Effie, Liz. Well, there's very few people here. But we're going to be facilitating some breakout rooms where we can kind of just come together, breakout like little groups, where we can just kind of sit together and just reflect on what we've heard and whether we might be willing to take action. Because like I say, we're looking to get those 500 sign-ups in to make this happen and change the world. So if you want to stay on and talk further, then we will try and gather people. All right, so maybe just pick your hands up if you wanna engage in this conversation just a little bit more. Okay, grand. So it looks like we've got enough for maybe about 2 breakouts. So maybe if you want to just come over here if you want to talk a bit more. And for everyone else, thank you so much.